Meredith, you can't just walk into my house unannounced, I said, voice firm as I stepped into the entryway. Riley hovered behind me, arms crossed, glare steady. That master key you use, it didn't log your entry. I'm Nora Vance, and I've already patched the lock's firmware to flag unauthorized access. Where are you both watching from? Subscribe and don't blink. This just got personal. When I first moved into Briar Glen Estates, it was me, my late dad, and that old porch swing under the magnolia tree he planted. He passed 3 years ago, last autumn, right when the blossoms turned gold. That tree, his legacy matters more than HOA's rulebook. Meredith Langston gave me a tight smile. Routine check, Nora. We reserve the right under Section C12. Your right doesn't override property law, I shot back. I inherited this from my father, a Navy vet who built that swing after he came home. You want access? You go through me. My eyes flicked to Riley. She'd lost her grandfather and got this house, this neighborhood. It's our anchor. Riley stepped forward, tone clipped. You left a door unlocked, again, at midnight. My phone pinged me when it crunched your key. This isn't oversight. Meredith's forehead creased. Fine, I'll schedule it. Then write it down, legally, or don't come in at all. My voice lowered, steady. I wrote the firmware that controls the locks and logs every entry. You want to ask? Knock. Ask, not sneak. She hesitated, her posture shifting. All right, she said too quickly. We'll talk tomorrow. Documented. Riley and I exchanged a look, small victory, but enough to show we weren't backing down. I paused in front of the swing, sunlight through magnolia petals dusting the wood. This swing was his favorite place, I said, softer. He told Riley when she was 4, this swing holds family. We're protective. Meredith cleared her throat and scraped her heels. I understand. We'll be formal going forward. Good, I stepped closer. Because I'm not doing games. Not after what you've shoved under our door. She nodded stiffly and without another word turned on her heel and left. I closed the door, took a slow breath. Riley set her phone on the counter. Got it all? Yeah, I said. Now we wait and record. Morning light filtered through the magnolia's petals as Riley and I stepped onto the porch. She carried last night's pizza box and a printout of the firmware logs. 7 entries after midnight, she said, voice low. Same pattern. I nodded, scanning the street. 2 HOA notices were pinned to our mailbox. Flag height too tall and paint too warm. Vintage paint isn't code, I muttered, but let's deal. Riley shot me a look, equal parts annoyance and pride. We climbed into the car and drove to the paint store. I chose a brand match sample, then she teased, honor the legacy. I smiled. Gotta, Dad warned me. When we got home, I painted while Riley chalked a river on the sidewalk for her younger cousins. I saw Meredith across the street, superintending another neighbor's repainted trim. She glanced up. I offered a polite nod. She stiffly nodded back, then barked orders. 15 minutes later, a knock rattled the door. I answered to find another notice, parking on the curve, cited by anonymous. No mention of specifics, not a permit, just a fine, a gift-wrapped pettiness. I held it silently, then dropped it into the herb planter, right by Mom's rosemary. Riley touched my arm. This is going to escalate. I poured iced tea and sat on the porch swing under the tree. Its boards creaked like old bones. I thought of Dad's warnings. Small rules lead to bigger demands. Inside, Riley set up extra point-of-view cams around the swing and the magnolia tree. If they wanted our porch, they'd have to come front record it. That afternoon, we checked the HOA portal. Meredith had added a tree maintenance clause, mandatory trimming within 5 feet of the trunk. I laughed. They'd defined tree to include magnolia bushes. We'd anticipated this. I downloaded the bylaw and printed it. I circled the clause and wrote sketchy. Then I emailed Meredith asking for clarification under civil code. I quoted the legal section requiring HOA to serve by registered mail. She replied, "We'll review." Even that reply felt like a crack. Opportunity. Later, as dusk fell, Riley walked outside and found a parking cone and a handwritten sign taped to the swing. Swing not OA approved. The ink was smudged, like it had been planted in a hurry. Emotion hit me. Anger, fear, fierce protectiveness, but Riley caught it first. She rubbed my shoulder. They want to fight? Fine. We cleared the sign together. She finished her sidewalk chalk river, and I pounded the final nail into the painted swingboard, navy blue, like Dad liked it. It looked sharp against the green lawn. That night, we tagged HOA logs in our system, door access, notices, clause changes. Our database was growing, so was their aggression. Before bed, Riley whispered, "Dad's swing is sacred." I hugged her tight. Tomorrow, we've got to back them down, strategically, not emotionally. The next morning, I woke up to find 2 uniformed men standing on my lawn with clipboards. Riley met me at the door, her hair still damp from the shower, towel around her shoulders. "Morning," one of them said. "Here to evaluate the structural compliance of your porch swing. HOA sent in a request." I blinked. "Structural compliance?" He gestured with a pen. "The claim is it's a safety hazard, potential liability." I looked back at the swing. My dad had built it with hurricane bolts and reinforced chains. It had outlived 2 ice storms and a microburst. This wasn't about safety. "It's not moving," I said flatly. "You don't have jurisdiction." "We're just contractors," he shrugged, "but they've already filed for formal inspection." I stepped aside and pointed at the magnolia tree. "That tree is older than the HOA charter. You really think some clause about non-conforming leisure seating is going to hold in court?" They exchanged looks and walked off. Riley raised her eyebrows behind me. "We're getting under their skin." That night, I got the name of the HOA board member who had filed the complaint. Diane Trent, the same Diane who used to bring us cookies every Christmas. She hadn't spoken to me in months, not since Meredith took over. I cornered her the next day. She was walking her schnauzer around the block, sunglasses on, face tight. "Diane," I said calmly, "do you know what Meredith's doing with these inspections?" She didn't stop. "I'm not supposed to comment." "She's targeting us. Over a porch swing, over chalk on a sidewalk. You were there when Dad built that swing. You know it's safe." She slowed, just slightly. Her dog sniffed at the grass. She kept her gaze straight ahead, but her voice cracked. "I didn't sign that complaint. Meredith submitted it under my name." I frowned. "You're telling me she forged it?" A beat. Diane didn't nod, but she didn't deny it either. "I just want to keep my job." I let her walk away, but the damage was done. On their end, she was crumbling. I just had to be patient. Later that week, Meredith posted a new directive in the HOA portal. Any resident recording board members without permission would be fined and referred for legal action. Riley burst out laughing. "She's scared of the footage," she said. "She knows we're documenting." I checked our server logs. Camera 3, the one pointed toward the porch, had a small spike in data packets around 2:11 a.m., unauthorized motion, a brief flash, no one on screen. I zoomed into the footage and noticed something strange. A glint, something reflecting, like a key in a hand that never crossed into full frame. "You see that?" I asked. Riley nodded. "She's testing the locks." That night, I installed a second deadbolt and moved the swing to a slightly higher angle, right in full view. We left a small lawn sign out, surveillance active, civil counsel retained. And yet, something still felt off. Like we were playing chess against someone who'd already hidden the queen in our pocket. At breakfast, Riley handed me a folder she'd found while cleaning out the hall closet. "Dad's HOA notes," she said, "stuff from years ago." I opened it and found printed bylaws, annotated in blue pen, my father's handwriting. He'd underlined a clause. Emergency access may only be granted during active life-threatening scenarios. Entry without cause is trespassing under State Statute 39B. He'd even drawn a margin note. They can't open your door just because they want to. Riley looked up. "We need to push back, legally." "Not yet," I said. "We build the record and we wait for the break." Because Diane Trent was cracking, and Meredith Langston, she was starting to slip. Have you ever faced an HOA that pushed too far? Share your story in the comments or just let us know where you're watching from. Your voice matters, and you're not alone. A long pause. "You're welcome to appeal it at the next board meeting." Click. The speaker died. I gritted my teeth. The timing wasn't random. Riley had just made the honor roll and posted a photo near the bench, my dad's bench, the one Meredith kept calling non-compliant structure. That bench had been here since before she even lived on this block, before the HOA had bylaws, hell, before I was old enough to know what a regulation was. I buzzed in the override, one of the few privileges I still had as a legacy resident. The gate opened. Riley marched through, tossing me a look I knew well. "They're trying to get to you, Dad. Don't let them." Easier said than done. That afternoon, I caught Doug's grounds enforcer pacing along my east fence, clipboard in hand. He squinted at the drainage ditch like it owed him money. "You plan on digging this out?" he asked. "It's a ditch, Doug. It drains rain. Been that way since my dad installed it in '84. He scratched behind his ear. "Well, now it's considered a hazard." "Hilarious," I said, stepping forward. "Isn't this the same ditch you stood in during the flood last winter, telling Channel 6 how it saved the cul-de-sac?" Doug's mouth twitched. Policies changed. I let the silence hang. He looked everywhere but at me. And that's when I realized something. It wasn't comfortable anymore. His voice was tight, his stance stiff, like someone on the edge of saying too much and afraid of who might hear. "You all right?" I asked. He shook his head like he wanted to say something else, but the moment passed. He turned and walked off, muttering, "Better have it cleared by inspection day." That night, I sat in the den flipping through old records, deeds, architectural drawings, even faded photos from when the bench was first built. Riley came in quietly, holding something behind her back. "What's that?" She hesitated, then handed it over, a small palm-sized audio recorder. I borrowed it from Ms. Trent." I blinked. "Diane?" Riley nodded. "She said you should have it. She didn't say what's on it, just that you'd understand." I stared at the little device like it might explode. Diane Trent, the HOA's secretary, was Meredith's right hand, and she'd just handed us a breadcrumb. Riley sat down beside me. "What if they're hiding something, Dad? What if they've done this to other people too?" "They might have," I said quietly, "but nobody's ever pushed back. Not really. Not until now." I pressed play, and what I heard made my blood run cold. Meredith's voice, clipped and smug. "If they won't sell, we push them out. Code violations, access restrictions, security fines. They'll cave, they always do, and when they do, we buy low." Another voice, Doug, sounding uncomfortable. "And if they don't?" Meredith again. "Then we escalate, quietly." I stopped the recording. Riley stared at me, eyes wide. "They're running people out," she whispered. "Yeah," I said, "and they picked the wrong damn family this time." Because I wasn't just some legacy homeowner clinging to an old porch swing and memories. I was a cybersecurity consultant. I'd written systems more complex than the HOA's whole digital infrastructure. I knew how to fight without ever raising my voice. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I kept hearing Meredith's voice in my head. "If they won't sell, we push them out," like our home was some line item on her spreadsheet. I kept pacing, replaying the recording until the battery died. When dawn hit, I was in the garage with an old banker's box my dad used to call the vault. Riley peeked in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What are you doing?" "Looking for backup," I said, lifting out faded blueprints, newspaper clippings, even the original HOA charter, typed, not printed. "Your grandpa used to document everything. You think there's something in there we can use?" I didn't answer, not yet. I was too busy pulling out the paper trail of my father's life. His fight to keep this house after the recession, his back-and-forth letters with the first HOA president, his hand-sketched plan for the porch bench. He had written in bold, proud strokes, "Built in honor of Emily, 1994. My mom." I hadn't seen that note in years. And that's when I noticed the envelope. It wasn't labeled, tucked behind old tax records. Inside was a small flash drive wrapped in a rubber band. I plugged it into my laptop. Most of it was boring, photos of Dad's woodworking projects, a few scanned receipts. But one folder caught my eye. HOA, transition docs. I clicked. Meeting minutes from 15 years ago, scanned PDFs. And buried in one of them a paragraph about property access rights, written before Meredith joined the board. I read it out loud. "Legacy homeowners shall retain unconditional access to personal security systems and entry infrastructure due to proprietary installations prior to digital conversion." Riley looked over my shoulder. "Wait, Are you saying they can't block us out? Not legally, I said. They've just been bluffing, counting on nobody reading the fine print. I leaned back and laughed. Once, short, bitter, all this time they'd been waving policies like weapons. And the real defense had been sitting in a dusty folder in my garage. Outside, a thud broke the quiet. I rushed to the front door, Riley behind me. We stepped onto the porch and found a notice nailed into the wood. Final violation, unauthorized structure, removal required within 48 hours. They'd nailed it into the bench. Riley gasped. They touched Grandpa's bench? I yanked the notice off, knuckles white. They just made it personal. That afternoon, I found Diane Trent watering her potted ferns 3 houses down. She didn't look surprised when I approached. Just tired. I listened to the recording, I said. It's damning. She didn't meet my eyes. I thought it might be. Will help us? I asked. Her hands trembled slightly as she clipped dead leaves. Because I remember when this street had real neighbors, not petty tyrants with rule books. You saw what they did to our entry access, I added. What they're doing to that bench? Diane paused. They want you gone, Cole. Not because of anything you've done, but because you remind them this place didn't used to be theirs. I stepped closer. Will you testify? Her face went pale. Not yet. I can't. But I can get you a list. A list? She nodded, slipping an envelope from under the flower pot. Families, people who left after similar harassment, dates, fines, even a couple who filed police reports that disappeared. I took it. Thank you. Back home, I tucked the documents into a new folder, countermeasure prep, because now I had more than righteous anger. I had patterns, data, names. And in my line of work, that was how you built a case. Riley watched from the doorway. What happens next? I looked at her. We stopped playing defense. By the time the sun dipped low, the porch lights flickered on automatically, just like Dad wired them decades ago. I stepped outside and sat on the old bench, tracing my fingers along the faded carving in the armrest. For Emily. They wanted it gone in 48 hours. Over my dead Maudie. I didn't just sit out there to cool off. I had a plan now. Diane's envelope had opened the floodgates. The list of names, dates, and incident descriptions had a pattern. The same sequence, minor infractions, escalating fines, then locked gates or sudden utility issues. A few neighbors even filed harassment complaints that vanished in thin air. They'd done this before, and they'd gotten away with it because nobody had the tools or time to fight back. But I did. Inside, Riley was at the dining table, sorting documents into folders. She looked up. You ready? Yeah, I said. Let's go see what else they buried. We went back to the garage. Not the tool side. The old storage corner, dusty shelving, taped boxes, a few things marked in Sharpie, holiday, old tech, Dad's stuff. I popped open a box labeled Office 3 and hit gold. An old black binder with peeling corners. Inside, the HOA transition records my dad received as one of the founding residents. Riley held the flashlight. This stuff looks ancient. It is, I said, but it's legal. The air was stale, cobwebs hung off corners. I shifted another box and something metallic clinked behind it. Riley crouched. Hold on, what's that? She reached into the narrow gap and pulled out a long, narrow tin, the kind of thing you'd hide cash or old keys in. The latch clicked open, and inside, a silver key, engraved faintly with Master Gate Access 2001. We stared at it. They've been using these, Riley whispered. That's how Meredith gets in. It's a universal... My mind raced. That meant 2 things. 1, she had physical access to every gate and smart lock in the neighborhood. And 2, Dad must have kept this as proof before the HOA updated the system, which meant there might be more. I pulled out another binder. Buried beneath bylaws and plumbing permits was a letter, a resignation from the original HOA treasurer, dated the same month Meredith took over as president. The letter hinted at misuse of funds and ethical concerns. I looked up at Riley. He tried to warn people. She exhaled, and no one listened. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, anger, deep, steady anger. We were onto something bigger than harassment. Meredith wasn't just cruel, she was careful. She replaced original board members, rewrote codes, consolidated control. That's why the bench bothered her. It wasn't just wood, it was history, proof of a time before her rule. I need you to take photos, I told Riley. All of it. Documents, the key, that resignation letter. We're building a timeline. And what are you gonna do? I grab my laptop, start drafting a report. If I'm right, Meredith's been running a private real estate pipeline, bullying folks out, buying at a loss, flipping the properties? Riley blinked. You think it's that big? Big enough for a quiet federal case. That night, I set the binder beside the bench and sat there again, just like Dad used to when he came in from the shop. I could almost hear him. Document everything, Cole. Never let him rewrite history just because they've got a clipboard and a suit. The wind rustled the trees, and a few petals from the garden blew across the porch. Riley stood in the doorway, phone in hand, silhouetted by the warm hallway light. It's all saved to the cloud now, she said softly. Good, I said. Let 'em try and burn this down. We've got backups. Have you ever found something in your family's old records that changed everything? Drop your story in the comments or let us know where you're watching from. You're not alone in this fight. Diane Trent was waiting in her garden when I got home, still in her beige slacks, pruning shears shaking just enough to catch the light. I heard about Meredith, she said, not looking up. Your girl caught her inside? I didn't answer right away. The weight of it had already done its damage. Riley wasn't sleeping, barely eating, and had started locking her door with a chair shoved under the handle. Diane finally met my eyes. Her mouth opened, closed, then... She used the master key, Diane whispered. We all have one, but she made copies. My jaw clenched. That key's only supposed to be used for emergencies, gas leaks, fires, not peeking through someone's bedroom drawers. Diane looked like she wanted to disappear. She said you were hiding things, that your father's easement was fraudulent, that if she could find papers, she'd prove it. She broke the law, Diane. Diane just nodded. I know, and I'm sorry I didn't vote for her re-election, but I didn't stop her either. I didn't need a confession, but I had one, and it was time to act. After Diane left, I dug out my father's old home server, an industrial Hulk he'd wired through the crawl space years ago, the same one Meredith never noticed because she thought she knew everything about my family. She'd never seen the wiring schematic etched into the wood panel behind the breaker box or the bypass switch that logged surveillance separately. I flipped the switch. 3 hours of footage loaded into my laptop, Meredith entering the house, digging through drawers, flipping through my father's ledger, pausing long enough in Riley's room to read a postcard off her bulletin board, then locking the door behind her as if she was the homeowner. Got you. But footage wasn't enough. I needed motive, context. I went back to my dad's archives, hunting through his HOA minutes, his dispute notes, and eventually his notes on the original easement that exempted our property from the HOA's jurisdiction. I needed something she would kill to erase. And I found it. A transfer memo, signed 1996, transferring parcel rights of our lot and the land under the magnolia tree back to the county in exchange for a tax lien forgiveness deal the HOA couldn't touch. It wasn't in any of the digital archives because the county server crashed in 2001 and the scanned records had never been properly re-uploaded. But my dad? He had it printed, dated, and notarized. I sat on the porch swing with the document in my hands, same swing I used to share root beers with Dad on. The paper shook just slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Meredith hadn't just been digging. She'd been looking to bury me, same way she tried to bury my father's reputation. I scanned every page into cloud storage, encrypted it twice, and sent a backup to a law firm I used to contract with in D.C. Time to go on offense. That night, I met with Riley in the kitchen. She was already there, tapping her fingers on the marble island. You're gonna fight her, aren't you? She asked quietly. I'll just start. She nodded. Good, because I want to help. You've helped more than you know. She slid a piece of folded paper across the island. What's this? Something she dropped. I found it under my bed. It was a handwritten checklist. Master key plan was scrawled at the top. Under it, target, Vance property, check office, check drawers, retrieve ledger. We had her. In her own handwriting. Good girl, I said softly. Riley gave me a small, fierce smile. Let's bury her, Mom. Not this time, Meredith. Not ever again. Meredith, don't move. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. The silence in the Langston foyer was already louder than a siren. Meredith froze mid-step, her perfectly manicured fingers still hovering over the glossy tablet she'd been frantically scrolling through. Behind me, Riley tightened her grip on the camcorder in her hand, its red light blinking steady. Diane Trent sat stiff on the love seat like she'd been turned stone. Her eyes flicked to the tablet, then to me, then to Meredith, who, despite the facade cracking, still had that practiced fake calm smile on her lips. "You really thought this would stay buried?" I asked. "You let yourself into my house with a master key. Illegally. You accessed my dead father's files. Illegally. You changed security parameters to push an illegal amendment onto the HOA charter. One that benefited your husband's contracting firm. Triple illegal." She opened her mouth to object, but I raised a hand. "Don't. I recorded everything. I have digital logs, IP traces, the cam footage Riley grabbed when you trespassed. You left a digital footprint like a stomping elephant." It wasn't anger that made my voice shake. It was control. Biting down the fury, channeling it into precision. Her face twitched. "You don't understand the responsibilities that come with this community. Sometimes—" "No," Diane cut in softly. Everyone turned. "I need to say this," Diane said, rising. "Meredith, I saw you. Weeks ago, I kept quiet because I thought it was just protocol, but you went too far. You used that key. I watched you walk into the Vance house when no one was home. I thought maybe you were doing a welfare check after his heart attack, but you came out with a file box. You—" smiled. Meredith turned toward her like a wolf sensing betrayal. "You ungrateful—" "I have the HOA footage," Diane added quickly, shaking. "I pulled it from the auxiliary cam after Riley told me something felt off. I didn't delete it like you asked. It's on a flash drive, and Nora, she has it now." I nodded toward Riley, who held it up between her fingers like a trophy. The room caved in around Meredith. She looked cornered, wounded, but mostly exposed. I took a breath. "That's enough. Meredith Langston, you are hereby being served with a civil injunction and a criminal trespass complaint. The sheriff has copies, and next week, during the HOA board vote, I'll be calling for your removal under Section 14C. Her nostrils flared. "You think this community will side with you? With some paranoid tech widow and a moody teenager?" Riley stepped forward before I could answer. "You broke into our house. You deleted our grandfather's files. You tried to rewrite the rules to make yourself rich. You think the community will back that?" A beat. And then Meredith smirked. "You've got a lot of faith in neighbors, sweetheart. We'll see." I leaned in. "Oh, I don't need faith. I've got receipts, footage, and a flash drive full of HOA tampering. And one more thing. My dad, he didn't just plant a tree in that yard. He hard-coded a time-stamped backup into the old porch swing post. Didn't trust anyone, especially not a woman who smiled while stealing his legacy." That hit her. I saw her eyes flicker. She remembered the swing. Meredith stormed past us, slamming the door behind her. Diane exhaled like she hadn't breathed in months. "I'm sorry. I should have spoken up earlier." "You did now," I said. "That counts." The swing outside creaked in the wind. Riley looked toward it, then back at me. "We go public now?" "Not yet," I said. "One more move left." We had what we needed, but the next part, that was the showstopper. Because it wasn't enough to prove Meredith wrong. I wanted the entire HOA to know who had really been protecting this neighborhood. Diane didn't come to work the next morning. That told me everything I needed to know. Meredith had gone full scorched earth behind the scenes. Whether it was threats, guilt, or shame, she was trying to bury this before it reached the board. But Meredith underestimated one thing. I'd already handed over the flash drive, and not just to one person. I didn't trust digital backups alone, not after what she'd erased from my father's system. So I'd burned copies, 3. One went to my attorney, one went into Riley's school locker, and the last, I mailed it, old school, certified mail, to the county records office. By noon, the HOA board had called for a closed-door emergency session. That was code for panic. "Mom," Riley whispered, nudging me from across the kitchen island. She held up her phone. "It's starting to spread." I took her phone. It was a neighborhood forum thread. Private, supposedly. But that didn't mean much when 3 different residents had already posted screenshots of Meredith entering our house. One of them had even annotated the timestamp. The clip Riley had leaked with Diane's blessing had made its way online. Some of the comments made me want to laugh, others made me want to cry. Wait, she used a key? That's illegal, right? I'm on the HOA and I never approved that amendment she pushed last spring. Meredith's bluffing. Thought something was off with her. And then, right in the middle, a reply from someone anonymous. She's not just off, she's dangerous. Ask her how she got that contract for the clubhouse remodel. I turned to Riley. Did you post that? She shook her head. No, but whoever did, they know more. A chill crawled down my back. Maybe we weren't the only ones Meredith had pushed too far. Time to start digging, I muttered. The thing about people like Meredith, they build a tower of lies but forget the foundation's full of cracks, and all I needed to do was find the weak point. I pulled the manila folder from beneath the floorboard in the garage where I'd stashed it during all this. It had every paper my dad kept on the HOA since its founding. Deeds, charters, notes in his shaky handwriting from the last year of his life. Highlighted sections, scribbled dates, red circles around inconsistencies. I flipped through, stopping at a single yellowed page. An original bylaw draft. There it was, clear as day. Any structural contract exceeding $10,000 0 cents must be submitted for member vote unless under emergency conditions. That remodel Meredith pushed through last summer, it was $38,000 0 cents, and there had been no vote. I laughed under my breath. Oh, Dad, you always did love paper trails. I scanned the page, converted it to PDF, and attached it to a group email. No narration, no drama, just the original bylaw, the contract cost, and a short note. Per 1994 HOA Charter Article 5B, no record of vote. This will be presented at the next session unless addressed immediately. I clicked send. An hour later, I got a reply. Not from Meredith. From Stuart Lasky, the treasurer. Subject line, we need to talk, today. I drove to the park, same one where Riley learned to ride her bike. Stuart was already there, pacing by the swings, looking like he hadn't slept. I'm not a bad guy, he said the second I stepped out. Didn't say you were, yet. He looked at me, eyes tired. She threatened my wife's job. Said if I didn't approve the funding through the discretionary fund, she'd report her for zoning violations. I didn't even know those existed. She didn't have authority to push that remodel without a vote. He nodded. I know. I knew then, too. But I didn't think anyone would dig. I pulled the printout from my jacket pocket, handed it to him. You're going to read this out loud at the next board meeting. You're going to say why you let it slide. And you're going to second my motion to remove her. He stared at the paper, then me. You really doing this? Stuart, I said quietly. She broke into my house. My daughter caught her red hand. I'm not just doing this, I'm ending this. He nodded slowly. All right, let's end it. Have you ever dealt with an HOA crossing the line? Or maybe you've caught someone abusing their power and stood your ground? Drop your story in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. This community, it's louder than they think. You're bluffing, Meredith scoffed, but I didn't blink. I pulled the folder from my bag and slid it across the table at the town records office. Inside were notarized statements, building permits, camera logs, and copies of property access violations dating back 6 months. Everything was tagged, dated, cross-referenced. The room had grown too quiet. The clerk, an older man with wire glasses and a name badge that read Roy, looked between us. This is a lot, he muttered. It's enough, I said. Enough to show misuse of a master key. Enough to show board members entering private property without warrant or consent. Meredith's voice cracked. You don't even have proof it was me. That's when Riley stepped forward, holding her phone like a torch. This was from the night of the break-in, she said, pressing play. Meredith's face lit up on the screen. Caught in our hallway, hands on the door, whispering to someone off camera, this won't take long. She looked older in the video, angrier, more desperate. And just like that, the room tipped. I don't need to prove intent, I said. I just need to show pattern, which we've done. Roy slowly leaned back in his chair. This needs to go to the county attorney, he said, turning toward his assistant. Make copies, all of it. Meredith stood, frozen, still as a statue. but her eyes were pacing the walls, looking for an exit. You didn't think a single dad with a teenage daughter could fight back, I said, but you underestimated one thing. She laughed bitterly, still trying to hold on to some thread of superiority. And what's that? I looked her dead in the eye. I know the system better than you. She didn't speak after that, not a word, just turned and left the records office, her heels clicking on the tile like a warning bell. Each step she took sounded like power slipping away. Back at the house that night, Riley sat with her feet curled under her on the porch swing. It creaked softly. The same swing my father built when I was a boy. She was quiet, thoughtful, the air around her strangely calm. You think she'll actually get charged? She asked. I exhaled. They might drag their feet, but now we've got more than whispers. We've got evidence. And a witness. Diane, she said. I nodded. Diane had called me the night before. Just a few words. Check the lock on your basement cabinet, and that was all it took. Her silent rebellion had finally spoken. I didn't know what she'd do next, but I knew she wouldn't be standing beside Meredith anymore. Riley looked up at the magnolia tree in our front yard. The flowers had started to bloom again, late for the season but beautiful nonetheless. You think Mom would have liked what we did? She asked, voice soft. I looked at her, really looked at her, this fierce, brave girl who stood her ground against everything. I think she'd be proud we didn't just take it, that we fought back. For our home, for her memory. Riley nodded, then leaned into my side. The porch light flickered once, a soft reminder of all the storms we'd weathered and all the ones we'd outlast. The room went dead quiet after my last sentence. I stood in the middle of the HOA meeting, my palms flat on the community center table, voice steady. You want to talk about safety, Meredith? I said, eyes locked on her pale, tight face. Then explain how a board president got access to a master key and used it to enter my home without consent. Or how that same key was found still in the lock, caught red-handed by my daughter. Want me to roll the footage? Gasps. One man's pen slipped from his hand and clattered on the tile floor. Meredith didn't speak. Her lips pressed together like she could strangle the truth behind them. My heart thudded so loud I barely heard Riley's voice from the back. I have the video on my phone. I'm ready to airdrop it. Every head turned to her. She stood by the doorway, confident in a way that caught people off guard. Not the scared teenager anymore. She was her mother's daughter, through and through. I scanned the room. Some board members were clearly shaken. Others looked like they wanted to slink through the exit. But one person stood out. Diane. Her eyes had been darting the entire time, lips trembling. Now she stood up slowly, hands shaking, and said, "There's something I need to say." Meredith whipped toward her. "Don't you dare!" "I have to." Diane's voice was thin but firm. She glanced at me, then back to the room. "The board approved the installation of new digital locks last year, right?" Meredith pushed it through, saying it was for neighborhood safety. But what she didn't tell anyone was, she kept the override codes. Every single one. More gasps. The room stirred with shocked murmurs. "She told us it was standard. Said the master key was only to be used in emergencies," Diane said. "But I saw her use it twice. Once to check for safety violations in an empty house, and once, last week, when she said she was making sure Nora's suspicious visitors weren't hiding anything." I laughed. It was dry, bitter, and sharp. "You mean my cousin from Houston and a carpenter I hired to fix the porch railing?" Meredith's voice cracked. "You've always acted like you're above the rules. This community needs structure. We can't have—" "What, freedom? Privacy?" I snapped. "You don't get to break into people's homes because you don't like their lawn chairs or their wind chimes." I pulled the thumb drive from my jacket pocket and held it up. "I've compiled every complaint, every notice, every fine you issued to my property. 93 in total. Most of them for things like a leaf in the gutter or a flower pot not matching the approved HOA palette." I slid the drive across the table toward the treasurer. "Each violation is time-stamped. Many were issued while I was out of state. That's stalking, Meredith. And guess what? The cameras on my porch caught her entering the house that day with gloves and a clipboard, right after Riley left for school." There was no stopping the fallout now. A lawyer in the crowd muttered, "Fourth Amendment violations at the very least." Another man asked, "Isn't this grounds for removal?" A third said, "It's criminal trespass." The room spiraled. Meredith tried to speak, but no one was listening. She looked smaller somehow, her power draining as the community she ruled turned on her. Diane stepped back, eyes wet. She mouthed a quiet thank you toward me. I nodded. It wasn't easy for her, I knew, but that whisper of courage, it mattered. One woman stood and said, "I move to call a vote of no confidence in Meredith Langston as HOA president, effective immediately." The motion passed before she could even sit down. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just picked up the USB, walked past Meredith's stunned expression, and slipped it into Riley's hand. "Let's go home," I told her. "Our home, not theirs." Riley and I didn't say much on the way back. We drove past the manicured lawns and identical mailboxes that had once felt like a prison gate. Today they looked small, decorative, like stage props for a play that just lost its villain. We pulled into the driveway. The magnolia tree leaned slightly over the porch, casting long shadows across the swing my father had hung years ago. That swing had seen every version of our family. Joy, grief, laughter, and lately, fear. I stopped at the foot of the porch and looked back at Riley. She'd already opened the front door, holding it like a challenge. No more sneaking. No more dread in her shoulders. "You coming?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. Give me a second." I ran my hand over the old swing. The wood was weathered, some of the grain peeling at the edges. My dad carved a small symbol into one of the arms, his initials and mine tied by a heart. A legacy, tucked in plain sight. This whole house was layered in that kind of meaning. That's why I fought like hell. That's why I stayed. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and lavender. Riley's doing, no doubt. She was already upstairs by the time I stepped in, and for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel watchful, it felt peaceful. Later that evening, I sat with a mug of tea and the paperwork from the emergency HOA vote. Meredith Langston was officially removed. The board voted unanimously, minus her, of course, to place Diane in temporary leadership until a formal election could be held. There'd still be fallout, investigations, probably press, maybe even a lawsuit, but the power dynamic had cracked, and once that kind of authority fractures, it's hard to rebuild, with fear alone. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Riley patted down in socks and held up something shiny. "The spare key to the master box," she said, tossing it into my hand. Diane handed it over, said she wanted everything out in the open now. I smiled. "We'll return it to the locksmiths in the morning. Every lock gets changed, every override deactivated." "About time," she muttered, curling up beside me. We didn't speak again for a while, just sat there, the weight of the last few months settling into memory. But eventually I said, "You know what scared me the most?" She looked up. "I wasn't afraid of the HOA, not really. I was afraid of you thinking this wasn't worth fighting for. That you'd start to believe this house, what your granddad built, was just another square on a street full of boxes." She didn't answer at first, but her fingers found mine. "I never thought that," she said, "not once." Outside, a breeze lifted the porch swing, rocking it gently. I watched it through the front window, its rhythm calm and steady like breath. Funny how something so simple, an old tree, a swing, a worn porch, could carry more meaning than all the bylaws and fine notices in the world. They tried to turn our home into a target, but they forgot one thing. We didn't just live here, we belonged here. I stood and walked outside, Riley following. We sat on the swing together, just like when she was little. The moonlight danced across the railing, casting shadows that looked like stitched lines holding things together. "You know," I said, glancing sideways at her, "your granddad once told me this swing would outlive us both. He said every good home needs something to hold your weight when life gets heavy." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "It did. The war's not over. These kinds of fights never really are. But I'll tell you this, once you stand your ground, really stand, they think twice before stepping over that line again. And that's the legacy I care about. Have you ever stood your ground against an overreaching HOA, or had to protect something your family built? I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below and tell me where you're watching from. Let's show these Karens we're not backing down.